Okay, so I'm going to do a couple of homework problems. You're probably going to have 8 to 10 of problems like this to do. First ones will look like this. It's a graph. So right here, again, very little work to do if you understand how to do this. This is asking you to find the domain of this graph. So the domain is the x values. So where does this x value start on the graph? It would be -8. Okay. Where does it end on this graph? It would be 9. So the domain goes from -8 to 9, and it's everything in between those. So how do we represent that? We represent that with interval notation. Okay. So it starts at -8. Is it included at -8? Yes, because it's a closed dot. So I'm going to use a bracket on the left. Do I use a bracket on the right? Yes, the 9 is included. So I would hit this right here, and it would bring me a bracket, put a comma there, and a bracket here. Okay, so again, I would hit that button, and then where does it start? -8 to 9. And that's the answer for this. If it asked me for the range, so I'm going to mess with this a little bit, okay? If it asked me for the range and it started at this point right here, and it was an open dot. So now, where would this range start? Well, range is the y values, okay? Range is y values. So I'm looking, what? Down to up. So where does this range start? Well, what's that value right there? The lowest point. The y value would equal 0. Okay, so is 0 included? Yes, it goes through that point. So if this was the range, I would have a bracket. Okay, it would start at 0, and then how high does this graph go? Not to the right. How high does it go? And this is the highest point right here. Okay, let's pretend this just barely goes underneath of it. So this is the highest point right there, which would be 7. Okay, does it hit 7? No, it's an open dot, so that would be a parentheses. Okay, so again, just an answer they could give you or a problem they give you would be one with range. Let's look at another problem. It says use graphing technology to find the range of the following function. So graphing technology means I'm going to have to go to Desmos. I'm going to have to type it in. Okay, well, how do I type that in? I'm going to, again, what was the problem? The problem was, let's see, negative absolute value of x plus 3 plus 6. So negative absolute value of x plus 3. So put in a negative absolute value. Where do I find the absolute value? Okay, for Desmos, see if I can get this stuff out of here for a second. For Desmos, I'm going to, that's being blocked right now. Come on. Pen recording. All right, well, let's see here. Nope, go back. All right, so we're going to get out my graphing calculator instead. Okay, so I'm going to go into my y equals. I'm going to put a negative. I'm going to find the absolute value symbol. Okay, absolute value symbol is this right here. So absolute value of x, it was an x. So for this calculator, x plus 3 plus 3. I'm going to close the parentheses, which those are the absolute value. And then I'm going to put a plus 6. So again, when I graph this, it gives me this absolute value sign right here, and it's asking for the domain and range. This goes all the way down and all the way up. So, or all the way down and all the way down. So the highest point here is 6, but these arrows go all the way to the left and all the way to the right. So if they go all the way to the left and all the way to the right, what would my answer be? So I'm asking for the range, not the domain. So the range is up and down. So where does this graph start up? It goes up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and Desmos is much easier to use. Okay, so it starts at 6 and goes all the way down to negative infinity. So this graph, again, would be a parentheses bracket. Why parentheses? Because we never include negative infinity. In range, we're talking about up and down. And it goes to +6, and that would be my range. Okay, again, looking at the graph. Starts at 6, goes down, but we always go from smallest to largest. And that's why it's negative infinity to 6. All right, let's take a look at another problem. This one is a little bit wordy, but again, just understand, what is this -4? -4 is the domain. So this says a college has a financial aid formula that applies to applicants whose family's income is below a certain threshold. The financial aid can be determined by the function. So they give you this function, 10,000 plus 1,000x, where x is the number of siblings, including half siblings and step siblings, that the applicant has living in the household. Find and interpret the given values. So if I plug in -4, Okay, so I'm asking, all they're doing is ask you to plug in -4. This would be 10,000 plus -4,000, which would be 6,000. Okay, so I would be putting here a 6,000, meaning a qualifying applicant with -4 siblings would get $6,000 in financial aid. And then this says, this interpretation makes sense or doesn't make sense. Is it possible for you to have -4 siblings? So you would say does not make sense. Does not make sense. Can't have -4 siblings. Okay. Okay. So f of 4. Plug in 4. Yes, you can have 4 siblings. So I plug it in. This would be 14,000. Okay, meaning a qualifying applicant with 4 siblings would get $14,000 in financial aid. Does this make sense? You would say yes, makes sense. Okay, and then you can plug in 3.5 into this. When you plug in 3.5, you get 10,000 plus 3.5, or 3,500. So that would be 13,500. Meaning, if you have 3.5 siblings, you would get $13,500. Does this make sense? Can you have 3.5 siblings? No. Even if your sibling is 1 foot tall, it's still a full sibling. Even if it's a half a sibling, it still counts as a full sibling. So this would say does not make sense. Okay, so there's going to be a couple problems like that. And then the last type of problem is going to look like this. And it's just simply giving you a graph. And it's saying, according to the graph, what is f of 1? So they're saying right here, the x value equals 1. What's the y value? Well, let's see. What's the x value here? -5. They're not talking about this. What's the x value here? 1. So the x value is 1. What's the range or the y value? It would be -5. So I would click on this, and you will be given about 10 problems like these 4.